An indigo dawn breaks over the beaches of Punta Cana, but one of last night's revelers is missing. The air tastes of salt and new sunlight. Waves lap ceaselessly at the shore, erasing footprints left in the sand. 20-year-old Sudiksha Konanki should have been asleep in her hotel room by now, dreaming off a night of dancing with friends. Instead, the sun rises on March 6th, 2025. Her name crackles across police radios. The gentle Dominican breeze carries an unthinkable truth. Sudiksha vanished without a trace from this postcard paradise, and the sand holds secrets it won't easily surrender. Welcome to Timeless Mysteries. Please like and subscribe.
If that was my daughter, I would do everything in the world to try to find what happened or find out where she is.
Today we're going to be talking about the disturbing disappearance of Sudiksha Konanki. Sudiksha wasn't just another tourist in the Dominican Republic. She was a beloved daughter, a brilliant student, a young woman with a world of promise, a junior at the University of Pittsburgh. She was studying biological sciences and chemistry. She was on a path that hinted at a future in medicine or research. In 2022, she graduated from Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, one of America's top ranked high schools, and she carried that bright ambition with her as she went into college. This spring break trip was meant to be a hard-earned respite. Sudiksha had flown to Punta Cana on March 3rd with 5 close college friends, all fellow Pitt students ready to trade late-night study sessions for palm trees and a turquoise surf. There were 6 young women from Virginia and Pennsylvania celebrating the joys of youth and friendship under the Caribbean sun. For a few days, their vacation was the stuff of dreams. Sun-soaked hours by the pool, laughter over beachside cocktails, and carefree dancing at the resort's nightclub filled their first nights in Punta Cana. On the night of March 5th, the group of friends dressed up and ventured out for what should have been another memorable evening. They sipped tropical drinks under the starry sky and swayed to the music, utterly unaware of the dark turn of fate that would soon take. Sometime past midnight, a power outage swept through the República hotel. An unexpected blackout that left guests restless and eager to escape the heat. Many vacationers drifted out of their rooms in search of relief in the ocean breeze. Sudiksha and her friends were among them, deciding to end the night with a moonlight walk on the beach. It was the kind of spontaneous adventure 20-somethings dream about. The beach after hours, waves glowing with the bioluminescence, the freedom of being young and alive. The last known hours of Sudiksha's life unfolded in the murky pre-dawn darkness of March 6th. Security cameras at the resort captured her and her companions heading down a path toward the Arena Gorda beach around 4:15 a.m. 6 young women and a couple of male friends had been seen in the grainy footage crossing onto the sand. Among them is Sudiksha, clad in casual beachwear, her flip-flops in hand as she laughs with a tall, sandy-haired college senior named Joshua Riibe. Joshua was 22, and he was not part of Sudiksha's original group of friends. He was a fellow spring breaker from Iowa, a student at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota. By chance or fate, their paths had converged at the resort's nightclub earlier that night. Joshua had been vacationing with other friends, but the electricity outage and the festive commingling of spring breakers brought everyone together. Sudiksha's friends welcomed him and a few others into their circle for the night's final adventure by the water. Down on the beach, the party continued in whisper and laughter. The ocean stretched out like an ink-black mirror. Some of the group waited at the water's edge, feeling the cool Atlantic foam lick their feet, while others relaxed on the damp sand. The minutes blurred peacefully into hours. By 5:30 a.m., hints of blue dawn crept into the sky. The all-nighter was catching up to many of these friends, and one by one, they decided to call it a night. Camera footage later confirmed that around 5:55 a.m., several of the young women, Sudiksha's roommates and closest friends, trudged back toward the hotel. Towels slung over their shoulders, they likely assumed Sudiksha would be right behind them or was walking back with someone else. What they didn't know was that Sudiksha had chosen to linger a little longer on the shore, accompanied only by Joshua. By 6 a.m., the surveillance cameras show the beach emptying out except for two figures, Sudiksha Konanki and Joshua Riibe. The next time the cameras would pick up movement, it would be Joshua returning alone. In the first pale light of morning, Sudiksha and Joshua remained by the water, two silhouettes against the vast ocean. What exactly transpired in those crucial moments remained shrouded in mystery and conflicting accounts. Joshua would later tell investigators that he and Sudiksha decided to go for a swim together in the pre-dawn glow. It was an impulsive decision, the kind you make when you are slightly buzzed on vacation and the warm sea is calling your name. They left their shoes, phones, and Sudiksha's cover-up in a pile on the sand and waded out into the surf. The water was cool and exhilarating. One can imagine Sudiksha squealing at the shock of it as gentle waves broke around their feet, then their waists, and then their chests. For a few minutes, it was fun. Just two college kids splashing under the purple sunrise. Then, without warning, fun turned into fear and panic. A sudden surge, a breaker larger than the rest, came crashing in. Joshua would later describe it as a strong wave that swept over them and yanked them into deeper water. In an instant, both Sudiksha and Joshua were pulled off of their feet. The current here is notoriously swift and unpredictable, especially at that early hour when the tide was near its peak. Joshua, who had passed lifeguard training, reacted on instinct, fighting the tug of the ocean. He managed to grab a hold of Sudiksha. The two struggled against the churning water, and the riptide was pulling them further away from the shore. It was a battle of muscle and willpower against nature's indifferent strength. At last, Joshua got his feet onto the sandy bottom of the ocean floor and dragged Sudiksha with him out of the treacherous current back toward the shallower water. Gasping for breath, they stumbled through the surf until they were near the water's edge once more. For a moment, it seemed the danger had passed. According to Joshua, both he and Sudiksha collapsed on the wet sand, coughing and exhausted. She was shaken but alive. The sky was growing lighter, and the beach was still deserted. No one had witnessed their brush with death. Joshua claimed he told Sudiksha to wait there while he went to retrieve their belongings a few yards away on the beach. Sudiksha, dazed and perhaps ill from inhaling seawater, rose unsteadily to her feet. Joshua later said the last time he saw Sudiksha, she was walking knee-deep in water near the shoreline, heading back toward where they had left their shoes and phones. He turned away from her for just a moment. That was all it took, whether due to adrenaline or the heavy fatigue that crashes in after an emergency. Joshua suddenly became violently ill. He vomited onto the sand, retching up salt water and bile. The long night of drinking and the shock of nearly drowning had caught up to him. Weak and woozy, Joshua then staggered to a nearby lounge chair. One of many scattered on the beach for daytime sunbathers, this is where he collapsed. He passed out cold under the dim morning glow, leaving Sudiksha alone by the water's edge. What happened to Sudiksha next is the agonizing question at the heart of this story. Did she wade back out into the surf, perhaps to wash sand off of her skin, or to clear her head, only to be caught by another ferocious wave? Did she wander down the beach, disoriented, and encounter somebody lurking in the morning's dawn-lit shadows? Or did something else entirely occur? Something only Joshua might know. When Joshua regained consciousness, it was mid-morning. By his account, sometime around 9 a.m., well into the morning. He was alone on the beach. The only sounds were the rhythmic crash of waves and the cries of seabirds wheeling overhead. Sudiksha was gone. Her footprints, if there were any, had been washed clean by the tide. Gathering his wits, Joshua assumed the obvious, that Sudiksha must have gone back to the hotel while he was sleeping, perhaps embarrassed that he'd passed out or simply unaware of how much time had elapsed. He trudged back to the República resort. He was caught on security camera around 10 a.m. Notably, he was alone. That afternoon, Sudiksha's friends began to worry. After the exhausting night, they had all slept in, expecting to see Sudiksha in their shared suite whenever they all awoke. But midday came and went with no sign of her. By 4 p.m. on March 6, concern turned to alarm. Sudiksha wasn't answering her phone. Her wallet and personal items were still in the room. She hadn't returned to retrieve anything. Panicked, her friends alerted hotel security and contacted the local authorities. Their friend had vanished. A search party of resort staff and volunteers retraced the group's steps. They found Sudiksha's sandals, her cell phone, and her cover-up still on the beach untouched. Exactly where she'd left them, something her family would later note was entirely out of character for Sudiksha, who was known to keep her phone on her at all times. As dusk fell again on Punta Cana, the realization set in that something was very, very wrong. Authorities lost no time mobilizing a massive search. The Dominican Civil Defense, National Police, and Navy launched a comprehensive sea, air, and land operation to find the missing college student. Through the night of March 6th and into the next day, helicopters buzzed over the coastline, scanning the waters for any sign of a body or a person in distress. Divers plunged into the surf zone and deeper waters, braving strong currents to comb the ocean floor. Rescue boats patrolled the shoreline and their searchlights sweeping across the waves after dark. Canine units trotted along the beach and the lush grounds of the resort, trained noses sniffing for human scent. On land, teams of soldiers in green camouflage fanned out through the resort's gardens and along the brushy periphery of the beach. The Dominican Republic's Attorney General even personally came to question Joshua in those first frantic days, underscoring how urgent the investigation had become. By March 7th, the U.S. Embassy in Santo Domingo was notified of Sudiksha's disappearance, and the case drew international attention. The FBI, the U.S. Department of State, became involved, coordinating with Dominican authorities and Sudiksha's hometown sheriff's office in Loudoun County, Virginia. Soon, agents from Homeland Security investigations and even the DEA were consulted. Was this a tragic accident or was there foul play? Every possibility was still on the table. Back in Virginia, the Konanki family's world was shattering. Sudiksha's mother and father dropped everything and flew to the Dominican Republic, desperate to assist in the search for their daughter. Just days earlier, they had watched Sudiksha leave for spring break with a smile on her face and sunblock in her luggage. Now, they found themselves wandering a foreign beach, calling out her name into the roar of the ocean. Reporters captured the anguish etched on their faces as they pleaded for answers. "We just want our daughter back," Sudiksha's father told the press in a trembling voice. In private moments, one imagined Sudiksha's mother picking up her daughter's sandals left behind on that beach and breaking down, overcome by the weight of fear and uncertainty crashing down around her. There's an old saying that the worst nightmare of any parent is to outlive their children. Every parent's deepest fear playing out amid the palms and sunlit shores of a place that should have been safe. In those early days of the investigation, one person naturally fell under intense scrutiny, the last known person to see Sudiksha alive. Joshua's account of the night was critical to understanding what might have happened, but almost immediately there were red flags, and not just the literal ones flapping along the beach. The investigators noted that Joshua's story had major inconsistencies and seemed to shift over time. Initially, according to a leaked police interview transcript, Joshua told authorities a version of events that went like this. Yes, he and Sudiksha went swimming and got swept offshore by a strong wave, but he managed to bring them back to safety on land. He said Sudiksha was fine after that rescue. She walked off in the shallow water toward where their belongings were, while he stayed back, vomiting up the seawater he had just swallowed. That was the last he saw of her, he claimed. In one telling to officials, Joshua implied that after he saved Sudiksha the first time, she went to collect her belongings and was swept away again by the water. It's a haunting image. Sudiksha thinking the ordeal was over, reaching for her flip-flops and phone on the sand, only to have the hungry ocean snatch her back up again while no one was watching. In another account given by Joshua, or perhaps failed to give, the emphasis was different. Dominican police have revealed that when pressed for details, Joshua at one point invoked his right to remain silent on advice from his attorneys. He stopped cooperating fully after his initial statements, and investigators noted a troubling addition. Joshua reportedly also said that he fell ill and blacked out on the beach chair while Sudiksha was still in the water. In this version, he doesn't clearly mention rescuing her at all. It suggests he might have left the water before her, becoming sick and passing out, and that Sudiksha was alone in those waves when he lost consciousness. Was Sudiksha safely on shore or still out in the ocean when Joshua last saw her? That discrepancy is colossal. It could change everything about what we believe happened. The contradictions don't end there. People who were on the trip have quietly shared that Joshua gave slightly different stories to different people in the chaotic aftermath. It's said that in the first hours when Sudiksha was just thought to be missing, Joshua told some of Sudiksha's friends that she walked off down the beach and he wasn't sure where she went. Later, to police, he gave the drowning story. The shifting narrative raised suspicion. Was Joshua hiding something? Could he have harmed Sudiksha and then fabricated the drowning scenario to cover his tracks? Or was he simply a confused, intoxicated young man who felt guilty he hadn't been able to save his friend and was grasping to make sense of a trauma? Authorities certainly had their concerns. They considered Joshua a person of interest in the case, though stopped short of calling him a suspect, and in the days immediately after the disappearance, they confiscated his passport and kept him under tight police surveillance at the resort. When Joshua tried to check out of the hotel to presumably return home, Dominican police intervened, effectively detaining him for further questioning. For 11 days, Joshua was stuck in Punta Cana, questioned repeatedly by the local police, the attorney general, and even Loudoun County detectives who flew down. While the search for Sudiksha intensified, his parents flew to the Dominican Republic to support him, loudly protesting that their son was being treated like a criminal when he had done nothing wrong. From an investigative standpoint, focusing on Joshua made sense. Statistically, the last person to see someone alive is often the key to the mystery. We remember Natalie Holloway, who disappeared in Aruba in 2005, how the young man last seen with her told multiple inconsistent stories that concealed a dark truth. We think of other cases where a so-called witness eventually is revealed as a perpetrator. Was this one of those cases? The true crime community buzzed with theories. Online forums dissected Joshua Riibe's background. He was an Eagle Scout, a college senior, majoring in land surveying and mapping sciences. He has no criminal record. He didn't seem like somebody who would harm a friend. And indeed, no evidence of foul play had been found. There was no signs of a struggle, no injuries on Joshua, nothing in Sudiksha's belongings to suggest a drug altercation gone wrong. Joshua was extensively interrogated and even subjected to hours-long interviews by Yini Reneso, the Dominican Republic's top prosecutor. In the end, despite the frustrations with his wavering statements, the authorities could not pin any crime on him. A Dominican judge ruled that Joshua had been unlawfully detained without charge and ordered his release. By March 18th, this was 12 days after Sudiksha had vanished, Joshua was allowed to leave the country. He promptly obtained a new passport at the U.S. consulate. Dominican officials had still been holding his original passport and flew home with his father. Loudoun County investigators back in Virginia also announced that Joshua would no longer be considered a person of interest. In the eyes of the law, Joshua Riibe was a witness and a victim of circumstance, nothing more. If Joshua's accounts are true, then the most logical explanation for Sudiksha's disappearance is the simplest and the saddest, an accidental drowning. From the start, Dominican authorities leaned toward this theory. 4 days after Sudiksha went missing, police officials told media that the working hypothesis was that Sudiksha drowned in the ocean after that early morning swim. The beach behind the Hotel Rio República is beautiful. Local residents and longtime visitors know its reputation well. That section of beach is known to be very dangerous. The area is near the end of a protective coral reef, which means the full force of the Atlantic hits the shore there. The very same stretch of sand had seen a horrific incident just weeks before Sudiksha's disappearance. 4 tourists drowned on January 17th with a red flag warning flying to caution of strong currents and high waves. A group of European travelers went swimming and never came back alive. Rescue crews later recovered the bodies of 2 Polish tourists, a Russian man, and a Portuguese man from the sea. 3 other people caught in the same riptide were luckier and were saved in time by the lifeguards and fellow swimmers. The community was shaken by that tragedy. Resorts up and down that coast reinforced their warnings, and some even pledged to hire more lifeguards to patrol the beach. Red flags are serious warnings. That was the message hammered home by the local news after those January drownings. Tragically, on the morning of March 6th, hotel staff had raised crimson banners along the beach to signal hazardous conditions, but Sudiksha and her friends ignored those. They said they had no idea what those red flags meant, if they even noticed them at all. Joshua's description of being swept out to sea by a sudden wave is entirely plausible. Rip currents along the Punta Cana's Atlantic coast can form in an instant. A swimmer can be pulled from waist-deep water into water over their heads in seconds. If Sudiksha indeed drowned, she may have been knocked unconscious, unable to call for help while Joshua lay passed out on the beach. If this is what happened, where is Sudiksha's body? It's the question that haunts everyone who hopes for closure in this case. Oceanographers note that in some rare cases, a body taken by a rip current might even get pulled into deeper channels or trapped under the reef itself, making recovery difficult. If the undertow dragged Sudiksha beyond the reef, the open Atlantic could have dispersed her far out into the blue expanse. It's a horrifying thought for her family, that she could be out there in that endless ocean beyond where everyone was looking.
So hopefully the family will have some desire to hopefully try to find their daughter.
Still, each surf report or washed up piece of debris raises pulses, only to dash hope when it turns out to be unrelated. Investigators have found no evidence whatsoever. Not a single witness had reported seeing or hearing a disturbance on the beach. There is no unknown DNA or blood found on Sudiksha or Josh's belongings. Surveillance footage didn't capture anyone else following Sudiksha or lurking around that area. But the resort's cameras only cover certain angles, and the beach itself was dark and largely unmonitored. As the investigation seemed to be hitting dead end after dead end, the Konanki family was forced to confront the unthinkable. So 11 agonizing days after Sudiksha went missing, her parents made a heart-wrenching decision.
On both sides of the authorities also clarified that the person of interest is not suspect from the killing. looking just with deep sadness and heavy. We heard that they're coming to the terms with the stars that our daughter has told. Who says incredibly difficult for us to process.
Believing that there was no evidence of foul play, they asked the Dominican authorities to issue an official declaration that Sudiksha was presumed dead. It was a moment of crushing defeat and unfathomable grief. Sudiksha's mother and father expressed gratitude to the authorities for their exhaustive search efforts and to Josh for his cooperation. It's hard to imagine the courage it took for them to reach that conclusion publicly. They were effectively giving up hope of finding Sudiksha alive. They were giving up hope of recovering her body, choosing instead to seek closure so they might begin to mourn. For many, it seemed the narrative ended there. A terrible accident on a spring break trip, a young life lost to the sea. And yet, even as the official investigation slowed, troubling questions and alternative scenarios continued to nag at those following the case. Could it really be that simple? Those closest to Sudiksha struggled to reconcile the drowning theory with her personality and habits. For one, Sudiksha was a strong swimmer who had grown up around pools. She wasn't reckless, and if she was conscious in the water, she'd fight hard to survive. Also, the lack of a body kept many from truly accepting the accident explanation. Loudoun County Sheriff's Office back in Virginia quietly kept an open file on Sudiksha's case, noting that until someone is found, alive or dead, you can't entirely close the book. What if something else happened on that beach? The Konanki family, before they resigned themselves to the drowning theory, had initially stated to the news media, "She's not found, so we're asking them to investigate multiple options, like kidnapping or abduction." The idea that their daughter might still be alive somewhere in need of help was not mere paranoia. The Caribbean, for all its beauty, has a darker side that tourists rarely glimpse. The Dominican Republic in particular has a long-standing issue with human trafficking and organized crime. In fact, human trafficking is the third largest illicit enterprise in the Caribbean region, generating about $9.5 billion a year. Women and girls are often targets. They have been forced into sexual exploitation both within the Dominican Republic and then trafficked abroad to places like Europe and even the United States. The vast majority of victims are locals or from poorer neighboring countries like Haiti and Venezuela. Still, opportunistic criminals can strike wherever they see vulnerability, even a tourist beach at dawn. Picture this scenario: Sudiksha, dazed and possibly still under the influence of alcohol and adrenaline, wanders away from the immediate beachfront where Joshua is passed out. Maybe she's looking for help or a restroom, or she's simply trying to get away from the water after nearly drowning. She mistakenly starts walking down the beach, away from the lights of the hotel. She doesn't notice it's too quiet and that she's being watched. Maybe it was a beach worker starting an early shift, a security guard making rounds, or a local predator who knows that tourists sometimes roam where they shouldn't. If Sudiksha encountered someone with ill intent, in her vulnerable state she would have been an easy target, a lone young woman, disoriented, separated from her friends. It's every traveler's nightmare scenario. Could someone have forced or lured her into a secluded area? Could she have been whisked away in a vehicle waiting at a nearby access road? The resort's property isn't completely fenced off. Beach access is open to the public coastline. The U.S. State Department warns that while rare, U.S. citizens have been kidnapped in the Dominican Republic in the past. More commonly, though, tourists face muggings or robberies, but those typically leave a victim behind, shaken but present. An abduction for human trafficking, on the other hand, would aim to leave no trace. The Dominican Republic, with its bustling tourist economy, unfortunately provides demand for the sex trade. It's conceivable that a criminal could have seen an opportunity watching this young female tourist walking alone at dawn. They might have subdued her with threats or even a drug and taken her to a hideout. From there, victims can be moved quickly. The nearby resorts all connect via local roads. The Punta Cana's airport or seaports could, in theory, facilitate smuggling a person out of the country if one had fake documents or bribed the right officials. The case of Amy Lynn Bradley often comes up in conversations about this scenario. Amy was a 23-year-old American woman who disappeared from a cruise ship while in port at Caraco in 1998. Her family later received a photo that suggested Amy had been forced into sexual slavery at a brothel. Decades later, Amy has never been found. Many believe she was trafficked after her disappearance. Could Sudiksha have met a similar fate? Her family was aware of these stories. They specifically mentioned human trafficking to the press in a line of inquiry they had wanted pursued. What happened to Sudiksha? There were no known witnesses of any struggle or of Sudiksha beyond the beach that morning. No ransom demand ever came, and trafficking a high-profile missing foreign student would be an exceedingly risky move for criminals, as it brings a level of law enforcement heat that organized traffickers try to avoid. Yet when someone disappears without a trace, the mind grasps at any explanation. True crime history shows that sometimes the improbable does happen. Could Sudiksha have been quietly led into a nearby beach villa or down an alley before anyone noticed? It's a disturbing thought that someone could be there one minute and literally vanish the next, not by nature's hand, but by human planning. If that happened, someone out there knows. Someone would have seen a scared girl, heard a cry, or noticed a stranger acting oddly around dawn on March 6th. Another unnerving possibility sits between accident and abduction. Was Sudiksha drugged that night? Not by Joshua or her friends, but by a stranger either at the club or on the beach. Travelers in the resort area must be vigilant about their drinks because drink spiking is a known threat. Unfortunately, even staff have been implicated in such incidents in the past. In one alarming account, a TripAdvisor review from another Punta Cana resort around that time described how a female guest believed she'd been drugged by bar staff. She experienced sudden and complete loss of muscle control, and she began foaming at the mouth and then fainting. And this was at the very same Rio República resort where Sudiksha vanished. There was an incident in 2023 where a young woman was clearly drugged during a hotel-sponsored party. A group of friends attending a jungle-themed party hosted by the RIA at a neighboring property reported that one of their friends accepted a shot of alcohol from someone and immediately became unresponsive, unable to walk or talk. Hotel staff had to carry the incapacitated woman to the on-site medical center where tests confirmed that she had been dosed with some kind of sedative. The friends later recounted in horror how they realized that they had narrowly avoided a potential assault or worse. If Sudiksha's drink had been tampered with at the nightclub, or if someone slipped something into her cup while they all sat on the beach, it might also explain why Joshua vomited and passed out so suddenly. Perhaps he too ingested something malicious. Could they both have been targets of a robbery or an assault? If a predator approached them on the beach after the others left, it would have been easy to overpower them. Joshua might have been left unconscious while Sudiksha was taken. One infamous case that rattled Punta Cana tourists was that of Tammy Lawrence Daly, a 51-year-old American woman who was attacked at a resort, the Majestic Elegance, in January of 2019. Tammy went out alone one night to get a late-night snack, and a mysterious assailant ambushed her from behind. She was beaten mercilessly. Her face was broken, her teeth shattered, but she lived to tell her story and to warn others that even in a luxury resort, danger can lurk in the shadows. No perpetrator was ever conclusively identified in her attack, though she suspects a hotel staff member was responsible. After hearing of Sudiksha's disappearance, Tammy publicly urged investigators not to rule out foul play. Could Sudiksha have faced a similar attacker, but with a worse outcome? Throughout this past March, stories like these of near misses and narrow escapes have circulated. They weren't meant to stoke fear as much as to remind the world that Sudiksha's disappearance was far from an open and shut case. Yes, the simplest answer is often the correct one, but the absence of hard evidence meant that other dark theories cannot be fully extinguished. On college campuses and Reddit threads, people swapped any tidbit they could find. One user on a forum wrote, "If there's no body recovered, that wouldn't seem like a crazy conspiracy to me," sarcastically reflecting a view that without a body, alternative explanations remain viable. Another commenter noted how eerily this case echoed Natalie Holloway's, where multiple lies by the last seen companion initially muddied the truth. In Natalie's case, it took 18 years and a confession to finally confirm her fate. For Sudiksha, it's only been weeks, and there is still hope. Sudiksha's friends and family refuse to let her story be forgotten. They've held vigils back home in Virginia and at Pitt, lighting candles and praying for answers. The Konanki family's public stance may have shifted to acceptance, but outwardly her mother can be seen wearing Sudiksha's favorite scarf. It's said that her father carried her last text message in his phone, "Love you, talk to you tomorrow." It's easy to imagine him rereading it until the screen is blurred with tears. Tomorrow never came for Sudiksha. Is Sudiksha out there somewhere, alive, alone, and afraid, needing help? Petitioning for a death certificate so soon is reflective of deep despair. Still, how could they without her body? In the true crime community, many understand this family's dilemma. There is a term, ambiguous loss, for when a loved one is missing and one oscillates between hope and grief. The Konankis live in that in-between space, 1 foot in the world where Sudiksha perished in the waves, and 1 foot in the world where she might still be alive and someday come home. Neither place is a place of peace. Only the truth, when it is finally uncovered, will allow them to move fully into mourning or into the less likely relief and joy. It's tempting to end her story by declaring it a tragedy of misjudgment, a reminder that nature is fierce and must be respected. Certainly, there is a lesson in that. The red flags on the beach are there for a reason, and had they heeded them, perhaps this story would have never been written. But there's also another lesson here to be learned, one of awareness and advocacy. Sudiksha's case not only illuminates the myriad dangers that can befall travelers from the indifferent cruelty of the sea, but also the predatory cruelty of criminals. Young travelers, especially women, have shared on social media how Sudiksha's story made them more cautious on their own spring breaks. Sticking together in groups, watching their drinks, avoiding isolated areas. In that way, Sudiksha is perhaps saving others even as we struggle to save her. Sudiksha Konanki is still missing. She is a daughter, a sister, a friend. She is loved. She matters. Somewhere out there, someone knows something. Were you in Punta Cana in March? I urge you to think hard. Did you see Sudiksha? Did you overhear talk of an incident? Sometimes even a casual vacation photo background can contain a clue. Maybe it's the taxi driver who saw a young woman walking alone near the resort road that morning. Maybe it's the hotel worker who noticed an unusual encounter but didn't think much of it at the time. Maybe it's another tourist who heard a scream carried on the wind while dozing on their balcony. No detail is too small to potentially crack this case. Perhaps one day the sea will give up its secret. a piece of clothing or a fragment of evidence that will wash ashore to write a final chapter on this saga. Until then, we must navigate the same two currents that have defined this story from the start. The current of facts pulling us towards one conclusion, and the current of possibilities tugging us towards another. As always, stay kind, be vigilant, and always question the truth. I'll catch you in the next video.